This is the Blackout Podcast.
Welcome to the Blackout Podcast, where I get to talk to amazing people that do amazing things. And today, I'm very lucky to finally get to talk with Jessica Wiebe, right? I said that correctly.
That's correct.
So where's Wiebe, like that last name from?
I'm originally from Manitoba. My grandparents on my father's side, their families originate from West Prussia, so now Poland.
Okay.
Yeah, and they were born in Ukraine and then immigrated just after World War II to Canada.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Did they come through Pier 21?
My grandfather did, yes.
Oh, snap. That's cool. I mean, I used to work there, and it's always great when, I have a story about someone that came through the Pier 21. It's always great when that happens. So, tell me a little bit more about yourself.
All right, where do you want me to start?
From way back.
Way back. So, like 5 years old, high school.
5 years old. As far back as I can remember. So we have a quick snapshot.
I'll give you
snapshot of your life.
a little timeline of my life.
Yeah.
I'm born and raised in Brandon, Manitoba. It's about 2 hours west of Winnipeg. Growing up, I did nothing but like musical theater, drama, choir, art, and then in my grade 12 year, I decided that after high school, I was going to join the military.
Like, why?
I was looking for a summer job that would pay enough to pay for my first year of university.
Okay.
And I was looking online, and it came up, like, join the reserves, $5,000 for, like, 2 months training, and then you work once a month. You have to commit to at least once a month to parade or train throughout the year. And I'm like, that'd be perfect for university. So I did my summer basic training and soldier qualification, got to my unit that September. And this was 2006, which was one of the worst years for Canada in Afghanistan. So every week from about like January on, reading the papers, we were losing a lot of people, and it was very prominent, especially in Brandon, Manitoba. The military base Shiloh is really close by. So I remember just reading the papers a lot and being very confused as to what was happening. And so I never had any intention to go to Afghanistan myself until I finished basic training, got back to my unit that fall, and met a few soldiers who just got back from Afghanistan. And hearing their stories, I had this weird gut feeling that it was something that I needed to go and experience and do myself.
What were some of the stories that she?
Just listening to them talk about their convoys through Kandahar city and the heat and just the actual fighting itself too. I couldn't understand what was like, why, that why. I still don't know why. People always ask me when they find out that I was in Afghanistan or in the military, like, why were we there? It's like, I don't have the answer for you, I think that we question that ourselves a lot. So I had that gut feeling, and I put my name on the list, and with not even a year in, I started my workup training, which was 11 months pre-deployment training, full-time in Shiloh at 1RCHA, which is the 1 Royal Canadian Horse Artillery. Oh, wow. And a month before my tour, I got transferred to 2PPCLI, which is the 2nd Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry. I was supposed to be part of their transport platoon, so to be security, like a right seater for convoys of resupply in Afghanistan. And when I got overseas, I ended up, they found out that I had a track light armor vehicle qualification, so I ended up getting pushed out to a security platoon to provide security for local Afghans that we hired to build roads and fix irrigation systems. So that's what I did the whole 6 months I was over there, and then got home and worked another year full-time, and then I was a little bitter.
Worked what?
Full-time.
Yeah, in the
military still. Yeah, and I was feeling really bitter and angry, and I had I don't know, what I experienced, and just, I think it's a bit of a shock. You turn off a lot of emotions when you're overseas, and when you come home, you're not really feeling those, or at least I didn't feel a lot and didn't really want to. And so I think I masked it with other things. And so I asked my unit for some time off, and I took off traveling, and I lived in New Zealand. And
wait, so when you asked for time off, how long do you ask for?
Well, so it's different. You can't really do that in the reg force, like the regular force working full time. But in the reserves, once you're in for a while, you can ask for what's called ED&T. And so you can take 6 months to a year off. And since I had just done a tour and I put a lot of work in, my unit said, yes, that's fine. So I took off, and I think I was running from a lot of things. And so...
Not just the military?
No, I think it's just like things that I experienced in the military, how it affected me, and trauma and some of those harder things to talk about. And I took off traveling. I was gone for, ended up being 14 months, and I got home and I had some...
And you were in New Zealand all that time?
Yeah, I was in New Zealand. I went to Bali. Did all of Southeast Asia and ended up in Nepal and India and came home.
Oh, wow.
So
what are some of the things you did while you were there?
I actually, I didn't do any art when I was in the military. I kind of put that aside. And so when I was traveling, I met a lot of artists, and I started to paint, and I started to draw again. So when I got home, I realized I wanted to get out of the military officially and go to art school. But yeah, it was a lot of just doing everything I could traveling, like, all the things you got to go see, like temples, and like I spent 2 months in Bali doing yoga and meditation. And
how was that?
It was amazing.
Did you take a lot of photos when you were on this trip?
Tons. I that was one thing when I was in Afghanistan. A friend of mine, he had a really nice DSLR camera, and I was a little envious overseas. I'm like, oh, I just have my little point and shoot. But I always wanted to take photos while I was over there of what was happening. But I had a job to do, and I was carrying my rifle or driving a vehicle.
Yeah.
So when I got home, I treated myself to a Nikon D90.
Nice.
And I was very excited to have that. So when I took off traveling, I carried that everywhere I went, took tons of photos. Never really showed them anywhere, but they're just my own little travel photos.
Is it something you'd show?
Yeah. What's that?
Like if you're ever doing like a Jessica, the years, blah, 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 would you do that exhibit?
I don't know. They're okay photos. Now, I didn't really know what I was doing. I had a nice camera and I was excited. I think I felt that no matter what photo I took with that nice camera, they turned out decent. Looking back, the composition, that kind of stuff isn't like anything special. But it was like part of like I like to document things. So that was a big part of my travel. And then and just meeting people. I love meeting people and learning from people. And the biggest lesson I learned traveling was that if you choose to do something that you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And I always questioned, how do you survive as an artist? And that's like the military, like I just put that aside, And so I saw people doing that, and I thought maybe I can do this. So when I got home, I had to face some of my own personal difficulties, and still am. But I decided to go to art school. So that brought me out to Halifax, Nova Scotia for NASCAD.
You decided, I mean, there are all these schools around. Why did you decide to come to NASCAD?
I came out to Halifax in grade 10 for it was like a festival, like a music festival thing for high school bands and jazz choirs. And I was in choir, so I had come out on a trip, and I loved Nova Scotia and wanted to come back. And I didn't really want to go out west, and I didn't really want to go to a big city. And so I thought Halifax could be it. And my cousin was out here too, which made it nice to have family here.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, NASCAD, how was that?
It was awesome.
What did you come to study?
I actually thought I thought I was going to do photography. That was like my plan. And then what I think is so wonderful about NASCAD is the foundation year, you get to try all of these different medias. And I learned that I really like to paint and draw. And so I focused a lot on that. But I think throughout my 4 years there, I did a bit of everything. Like I did textile work, and I did some photography, and I did, video, like a video class, and performance art, and turns out I just like to do everything, but which can be frustrating because I haven't mastered one of any of those things. I just love to dabble.
Personally, I think it's great, right? I mean, if you find this one thing you really like, go ahead and be great at it. But I think if you have the opportunity to learn how to do a little bit of everything, it's great, right?
Yeah.
Because you never know when you might need to use that.
Exactly.
You're like, I could do that. And plus, the more you do it, the better you get at it. So
exactly. Yeah, I find my subject matter has kind of stayed around the same thing, but the ways of expressing that is very different. I like to be challenged in that, and decide I'm doing something and have no idea how to do it, but then figure it out.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah. And then you get to meet people, and you get to collaborate with people who are doing different things as well. I think collaboration has so much power behind it. Yeah.
What was the first project you worked with someone else?
My first project with someone else. I think it was with Maya Eichler from the Mount. She teaches there. She's a professor, and she's a feminist researcher who studies military and war. And so I met her years ago. She actually interviewed me about the transitioning out of the military.
That must have been a tough interview.
Yeah, it was. It was. I don't think I was really fully ready for it when I did it, to sit down and answer some of those questions. But the work she's doing is really important. I know how many soldiers struggle with that transition, that it's important to have that information and data collected and analyzed and moved into like something that can put an action plan in. But then it was about a year after that, I was asked to speak at a conference at the Mount for the Mount Network for Community Engaged Research on War and Conflict. And it was community stories of peace and war. And so I was asked to talk about my work. So I presented there and she was a part of that. So then I kind of joined the team there and I've been working with them since. And Maya and I did a performance piece together for the Prismatic Arts Festival.
What was it?
We wanted to model how to engage in difficult dialogue on war and conflict, which is really awkward, right?
Yeah.
So I was a female, I am a female veteran, and she's a female, a feminist researcher on war and conflict. So we have very different views and perspectives and I guess emotions and that tied to those things. So for us to sit down and have a conversation was interesting because we butt heads in a couple spots, but we can still show that it's important to share our perspectives. We don't have to change our beliefs or our ideas or our opinions, but to listen to other people, to have a better understanding of where people are coming from, you know? So we sat and we kind of semi-scripted and we sat face-to-face in front of an audience and started to have this conversation and open up about some vulnerable areas, you know, that we wouldn't necessarily want to talk about or we avoid because people, it's uncomfortable to talk about war.
It is.
You know, it's to actually have the conversations tough. And when you hear stories, it's not easy. And so what was wonderful is we had such a diverse audience that day and we had people from different places around the world, different experiences of war and peace. And at the end, towards the end of the performance, we opened the dialogue up and we invited guests to exchange their stories with one another.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we kind of all like broke up and people started to have a conversation with the stranger next to them about their experiences and we provided a couple questions just to have something to feed off of.
So what did you call this performance?
What did we call it? I'm having a brain fart. The weight we share. So looking at the responsibility and carrying these stories. So Maya, as a researcher, she listens to veteran stories all the time, but those stories have a heavy weight, and she takes a little bit of that story with her, and she carries that weight with her. Whereas when I make art, I'm sharing the story. I'm sharing my own personal story, maybe the story of others, but I didn't realize that I was sharing that weight with the people who are taking in the work. So there's a responsibility, I think, with carrying that weight. And as a community, if we can share our stories with one another, we can start to share that weight and work together and listen to one another and have a better understanding of people's experiences and why they do things or why, you know, people feel a certain way about certain topics and, you know, to be able to have that conversation but not be angry. Yeah, it was really interesting. So that was the first collaboration piece. I realized how wonderful it was to work with someone who does something totally different, who writes for like academic papers. I don't do that, you know, so I just have ideas and I'm like, let's do this and this. And she's like, well, what are we trying to like work towards? So yeah.
Man, you know, movies and stuff, they glorify, you know, actually, no, I'm not even going to touch that. So
you can touch it. Touch it, Israel. Touch it. This is the discomfort right here.
Okay, well, so there's years ago, there was a movie called G.I. Jane. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yes.
You've seen it?
Yes.
Exactly. You know, so the movie is really well made. It's a pretty decent film. And, you know, there was the whole, you know, so this is, and then there's the whole, people don't want to send their daughters off to war and then come back. Like, you know, when you open the body bag, you don't want to see breast there, right? You know, it's always okay. And then someone like you was like, I felt this thing that I had to go. And, you know, there's always that slight disconnect between, how about you're a girl. why do you want to go and shoot guns, bang bang and stuff?
Yeah.
And when I'm going to guess in your career you've had to deal with something like that. How when you face that, how do you handle it? I mean, at least while you're still in active service.
I think I want to comment on something before I speak to that.
Okay.
Just about that whole thing about, there's this idea that women have are like this beautiful soul, and like if you look at any military movie, like say Saving Private Ryan, the whole point of the movie was to go and save Private Ryan so his mother doesn't have to have lost all of her sons, right? So and a lot of reasons men go to war is because they're told they're protecting their wives, their mothers, their daughters. And so I guess majority of female narratives of war are largely omitted from dominant discourse because it goes against the idea of women being like the beautiful soul or they shouldn't show any violence. But there's female terrorists out there. There's female soldiers. Both sides. Women do show or do act violently, I guess. I don't really know the proper term to use, but those stories are omitted. So I think it's important to share female narratives of war and conflict because they're important. And I think movies definitely avoid that largely. I don't really know how to comment on the question. If you could repeat it again.
Okay, so the question is when people are like, oh, well, you're a girl. Why are you going to fight guns and fight a war and stuff? How do you handle that? I mean, I don't know if they'll come out and ask you directly like that.
No.
But they might imply it.
I think I get angry. I feel a little bit angry inside. I think because I remember when I first got home and someone would ask me, you're in the military, what do you do? Did you carry a gun? I'm like, no, I just went out for it. I was just like the target. I just walked around the field, I am a trained soldier, I carried a rifle. I know how to fire artillery guns, I drove a track light armored vehicle. And it's interesting, the reactions. I remember when I was in New Zealand, I went to apply for a job to waitress at this little Italian pizza place. And I dropped my resume off. He said, sorry, we're not hiring. I said, well, if you can just hold on to it. If you do, let me know. I turned around to walk out and he's like, you were an artillery gunner? He's like, fuck off. And I was like, why is it so hard? But I get it all the time. I get it on Remembrance Day when I wear my medals. People ask me, are those your father's medals? And it's hard. I don't really know how what to say to that. The only thing I can do is continue to make work about war and conflict and share female narratives and try to normalize that because we have a lot of women in the military around the world doing amazing things. And women and men have different strengths and weaknesses, but I think when you bring people together, it balances out as a team. And so I think there's a lot of things that women bring to the military that men can't and vice versa. So I just think normalizing, having the conversation, and sharing stories that haven't been shared.
Okay, and then being in the unit, do you ever feel like because of a gender it was a thing?
Definitely, yeah. I think as a woman in the military, you constantly have to prove your worth and your ability to be there. So every new group of people I worked with, I had to prove that I could do what they could do, physically, mentally. And that's really hard. I think when I look at the trauma that I carry, or I hate saying trauma, but the shitty experiences that I had in the military was largely around those things of men not thinking you're good enough, and then you question if you're good enough, or harassment's a real thing, and so I think it's hard to be a woman in the military and not experience any of those things. I think it's like that in a lot of male-dominated jobs, sport, a lot of things like that. And so a lot of my working through stuff from the military has been around those things. Am I good enough? Do I deserve to be here? And just the things that men have said to me in the military, making me not feel worth it, but having to constantly push myself to prove that I can be there, that I can do my job is absolutely fucking exhausting. Yeah.
And
sorry, I've never actually said that out loud. But yeah, that's how I feel right about now. And it's not, and women can be bad too. We're very competitive, especially when there's very few women. I tended to be very competitive with the women that were in the military with me. Yeah, to show that I was tough, that I deserved, that I should be there. Yeah.
And do you find there's any part of your personality that was amped up from being in the military?
Like, what do you mean?
So, there's a part of yourself that the violence part you're talking about, you feel like being in the military jacks that up a bit?
I don't think so. I think if anything, I just had to be tougher. Like I think I'm a very sensitive person naturally. Like when I was in Afghanistan, I had to like, I guess, grow some balls in a sense, is like yell at people when I need to and be tough and be very, I guess, especially like in Afghanistan, you know, women don't show their faces. They don't, you know, and here I am walking around with my face wide open and, you know, I've got a rifle, and I had to, you know, yell at Afghan men and you had to be tougher. I don't know how to, I just, yeah. So I think coming home, I had a bit of that I had to shed. It took me a while to like let go of that, but I've always been the same me underneath it all. Yeah.
Did you ever paint, draw anything while you were there? Like
just like sitting in the tower post, like I would look out and I'd do my sketches for the arcs in front of me, but not really. It wasn't till traveling in New Zealand that I started to draw again. And then when I went to NASCAD, a lot of these things started to come out in my work, and I started to make work about Afghanistan, about my own personal experiences there, trying to I guess make work to bridge the gap between what soldiers experience and the civilian understanding of that experience. That's not shown like in cinema.
Nope.
You know, like the everyday just sitting and waiting. There's a lot of that, you know? so and just like the everyday stuff that doesn't get shown in movies that like I think that is really important part of the soldier's experience and coming home and how we get to like work through that transition. So I think those are things that I really felt passionately about, and I started to make work about that. And since NASCAD, I started to work more within the community and looking at how to engage in dialogue and war and conflict, how to make work that creates dialogue.
Wow.
Not necessarily change. I can't
Just
change things, but I mean, like I can, you know.
Get people, like, start
Awareness,
something.
I don't know, yeah.
You were, okay. Let me reel it back a bit.
Sorry, that's so much already.
Let me reel it back. So, with being in the military and the experiences you've had, how, and you say you bring that into your art, right? In what ways would they show?
At first, it was through drawings. So in my first year at NASCAD, I had Ian McKinnon, amazing drawing professor, amazing human being, who had us do ink washes and then gestural line drawings kind of over top of them. And so I had gone home.
Wait. What's ink wash?
Oh, so just like taking like straight up ink, mixing it with water.
Yeah.
So you have like really thick, dark ink washes or lighter, and I would just like outline and create like a bit of a shape on the page of what I wanted to draw. And then you look at the subject that you start to draw it in with like a pen on top, so you get like the wash with like a hard line.
Okay.
And so I went home and I looked at my photos from Afghanistan and I started to draw some of the imagery that I had taken in Afghanistan with my little point and shoot.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I did take some pictures, and so the things that I chose to emphasize in the drawings were the little things that civilians wouldn't necessarily know what they were. So an example would be on the antennas of vehicles, we would tape plastic water balls upside down, and we put infrared glow sticks inside them and close the lid. So therefore, any predators or UAVs above us would see that we're friendly.
Shoot us.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like those little details that like I wanted to include.
Holy shit! Wait, sorry, I'm sorry. Wait, what? You know. There's a. It's cool. It's cool when you see it on TV, but when you realize that those are real human beings, like I mean, I kind of read up a bit about you, and then I've seen what you're doing. I think just mentioning that's the first thing that actually hit me that wait, you've actually experienced some shit. Like, I know,
guess.
but just saying that,
Yeah.
like, I have to tell those guys up in the sky, do not. Holy shit.
That's such a little part of your day, you know?
Yeah.
So,
holy shit.
Yeah. So it's like those little details that I wanted to express so people can like, have that moment. Like,
Yeah.
oh wow, that's like
Yeah.
a thing. Yeah. And so that kind of like just kept moving. And I ended up meeting one of the gentlemen from the Citadel who work in the Army Museum. And they invited me to show my work up there, which has been up there my whole time at NASCAD pretty much. And still every once in a while I'll go up there and add some new things and change things out or volunteer when I can. But yeah, it's been quite the process. But like it's interesting to see like at NASCAD I was so in my own personal head and experience. And then since getting out of NASCAR, I've started to work with people and collaborate. And I'm finding those experiences extremely rich. And yeah.
Do you think, or actually, while you're in NASCAR, was there any, would people treat you differently once they find out you're in the military?
No, I think the only thing that I would say is like sometimes that critiques when I made work that was very personal. I think people wouldn't necessarily say stuff or critique it. Maybe they're worried, but it would hurt my feelings. So that made me question like if my work was even good. I wondered if the work could stand on its own without my story behind it. So I still question that. So I try to kind of, I think, further and further separate myself from the work too. And I think that's also branched out in different ways.
No, personally, I think, well, because when I introduce myself, I'm like, hello, I'm Israel, I'm a storyteller. And I think that that's just, it's a huge level of vulnerability that you're putting yourself in your work and you're putting yourself out there. And it doesn't matter what anybody says when they critique it. When you did the work, you felt a certain way about it. And when you put it out there, it's pretty much out of your hands.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I don't know. It hasn't stopped me from making the work. That's for sure. Like if anything, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think I've kind of embraced a lot of it, especially camouflage has been a very big reoccurring theme in my work. I can't run away from it.
But this is a really cool pattern, though. Like, I'd totally wear this.
I'm thinking about that next step, but I haven't got there yet.
Oh, like put it on textile?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
I'd totally wear it. So with the... okay.
I can explain how the camouflage kind of started if you want.
Let's go with that.
I actually, for a while when I got out of the military, I would see girls wearing like camouflage pants or shirts. I'm like, oh, that's so cute. And I would go to the store and I would like buy a pair myself. I put it on. I would get angry. I was like, where is this coming from? Like, so I just never wore camouflage I'm starting to wear more and more camouflage now. Maybe it's with the painting that I'm doing. But I remember my last year at NASCAD, I was dealing with Veterans Affairs, and I got bad news over the phone one day, and I got really upset and really angry. I just was frustrated and tired, and I wanted to give up on like even trying to do anything. And I wanted to break something, but like I've never really had that feeling to like smash anything. So I looked around my room, and I didn't really have anything to smash, but I had like this old cigar box, the Romeo and Juliet cigars that I got the box when I was in Afghanistan, and inside I had all my printed out images that I had taken.
Wait, first,
in
what
Afghanistan.
are Romeo and Juliet cigar boxes?
I don't know. It's a brand of cigars.
Gotcha.
I don't know. I just got the box and thought it was pretty.
Okay.
But I found the box in Afghanistan, but I kept like my printed out like hard copy of photos that I'd taken in Afghanistan. So I opened it up and I just started to tear them all apart, and it felt so good. And I was bawling at the same time,
and
I was so upset. And I they were scattered all over my floor, my bedroom, and I was so angry. And then I looked, and it looked like camouflage, and I burst out laughing because no matter how fucking hard I try, I just can't get away from camouflage. So I thought, you know what, instead of being angry, instead of being upset, maybe I should sit with these feelings and work through it. So I took embroidery thread, and I very tediously sewed all these little fragments together into a large camouflage net that was 8 feet by 6 feet. And my plan the whole time was, I'm going to make this net and then I'm going to burn it. I'm going to get rid of it. But then the more I sat with it, every time I picked up a little piece of photograph, like it brought back the tactility of like being in Afghanistan. So like the dust on my TLAV or the sweat.
The dust on your what?
My track light armored vehicle. So like the dust on the metal, or smells, and just like these things that weren't negative, but that were just part of the experience. And so by sitting with that for so long, I went through all of Gilmore Girls and like a million other Netflix series while like just in the background making this piece. But I ended up going out to Lawrencetown in January in the freezing cold, and I wore absolutely nothing but this camouflage net wrapped around me. And I stood there for about 9 minutes until I was absolutely numb and just let go. And it was the most liberating experience I had felt in a very long time.
How long ago was that?
That was 2015. I graduated. That's when I made that piece, and I had been in Afghanistan in 2008. So to let go of that, but still hold on to it. Like you can let go, but I think it's important to hold on to that little bit that really never leaves you. So that really inspired more and more work. I did a piece following that one. That was also a performance piece where at the NASCAD Wearable Arts Show, I filled 14 heavy sandbags, and I didn't allow myself to move forward until I picked them all up and moved them with me. And then at the end of the stage, I built a makeshift trench, and then I started picking the sandbags up and throwing them off the stage, to express the physical weight that soldiers carry on their deployments, but also the emotional weight that they still continue to carry. And so to let go of that by throwing it off the stage, but then to leave the stage still carrying two, to show that you can let go, but you still always have you're always carrying that experience with you, and that's okay. So to be able to use the body, use performance, and like sandbags as a symbolic way of expressing a weight, I think can be pretty powerful depending, yeah. So I've continued with those themes, and that's how I ended up working with Maya, with looking at the weight we share and those continuing themes of camouflage that have now worked into my paintings, and just embracing those things and finding ways to use that to express.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
that makes sense.
It does a lot. Like
Yeah.
how do your, say, people that are in your unit or just fellow soldiers, ex or still in the military, how do they handle your work?
I've had really great responses from soldiers. One person from my unit who I did one of my original drawings of, he actually made it out to Halifax a while ago, and he went to the museum, and he said it was really amazing to see an image of himself in a museum that holds so much history of the Canadian military, and to be a part of that was pretty incredible. So that alone makes me feel good. You know?
Tell me the story about the sandbags one. Was it
in Wolfville?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. So that one, I was kind of thinking about monuments and military monuments. To the Great War. A lot of monuments, they were built for World War I as a commemoration, and World War II was just added to it, and the Korean War was added to that again. And in Wolfville, it's interesting. In front of the Acadia Memorial Gymnasium, they have the World War I monument. But then there's a second monument erected for World War II in Korea, which is really interesting. And there's also female names that are inscribed on the World War I monument. And I was thinking of an idea to propose for Uncommon Common Art in Kings County, which is a site-specific public art event that happens every year. And they have multiple artists who make work, and they set it up outside for people to go and find throughout the summer. And so I wanted to, like, looking at monuments, especially war monuments, they tend to merge with the landscape over years, and people walk by them and they don't even notice them anymore. So I wanted to find a way to disrupt the invisibility of the monuments in Wolfville in front of the Acadia War Memorial, or Memorial Gymnasium. And I was looking at the history of Kings County in the military. And Camp Aldershot is where, well, first I looked at the Dominion Atlantic Railroad, which transported thousands of soldiers to Camp Aldershot to train pre-World War I and II. Then they hopped back on the train and headed to Halifax, where they were shipped out to Camp Aldershot in the UK. And so I thought the rail trail was a really interesting connection because it goes right by the Acadia Gymnasium. And so I wanted to look at the landscape that soldiers went through on their way to war. And so I looked at the distance between Camp Aldershot and the War Memorial, and it's the same distance you would do on a battle fitness test with your rucksack in the military, carrying a certain amount of weight. And so I thought it would be really interesting to do a performance piece where I marched from Camp Aldershot to the Acadia War Memorial and then built some sort of installation piece that would disrupt or bring people up to the monuments to read them. And so I ended up creating 2 sandbag work parties where I invited soldiers, veterans, civilians to come out to Camp Aldershot to fill sandbags from the sand that soldiers would have trained in the landscape. Yeah, and fill the sandbags and move them to the memorial. And then the day of march from Camp Aldershot to there, symbolically carrying that weight. So I also sculpted a concrete sandbag that weighed 55 pounds. So I carried that in my backpack. And what was the most amazing part of that work was the actual sandbag work parties and the walk, because there's soldiers, veterans, civilians sharing stories about their families' experiences in the war and really connecting the community. So that was phenomenal. And then when we got to the monument, we worked together to build a makeshift trench wall around the monuments, which invited people to step into the trench, I guess, symbolically, and actually read the names that are on there. And thinking about female narratives of war, I have my own. I walked, so I use my body as that part of the piece, but then also having the female names in the monument is quite incredible. So to have those little quiet moments of, female voice in there was really powerful for me. And working with the community was incredible. And then to talk to people afterwards and, locals say, they walk past here all the time and they don't even notice it. They didn't even know the monuments were there, and to now that every time they go by, they think about it. It's now been taken down, but the temporary aspect of it, people who saw it up, and now it's there, it still brings attention to that space. So I guess it would be considered a counter monument, which is something I've now done more research and want to continue working in that area. I don't know if that's the best way to explain. It's a very layered piece.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No, I mean, I remember watching that. I'm like, oh, wow. And,
it was a lot of work. Physically.
Exactly.
And just logistically.
Actually, you mentioned it was like the part of the battle fitness test.
Yes.
What does this fitness test involve?
It isn't a thing anymore in the military. They have a different test that they do every year. So every year in the military, you have to pass a battle fitness test to show that you're physically fit to be in the military. So you would do, I think it's 12-point-something kilometer march carrying a certain amount of weight in your backpack. And a rucksack, and then you would have your full fighting order, so your
full what?
Fighting order, so your tack vest, your rucksack, your helmet, and your rifle, and you walk that distance, you march it
with the weight
in your backpack or your rucksack, and then you would get to your location. Then you would do a fireman carrier and you dig a trench pretty much. And that was like, if you could pass that, you're physically fit. So that was something you have to do every year in the military. And so I thought that was interesting because that's part of basic training. Do you have a
time limit to do this?
Yes, there is a time limit. You have to do the march in a certain amount of time. Yeah. So I thought that was interesting to Camp Aldershot being where people did their basic training and so many marches, and then being able to walk that same distance. It was a bit more than the actual battle fitness test that we did between Camp Aldershot and Acadia, the Acadia gym. But it was so cool. So then instead of dig a trench, we built a trench. And it really connected with those themes of the military training and the physicality that soldiers have to do.
How was it for the people that were in the military in that party that you got together to?
Yeah, it was really interesting to hear them sharing their stories with people who don't have any understanding of the military and vice versa. Or one gentleman showed up the morning of and he said, you're going to be marching past my father's house and he fought and he trained at Camp Aldershot. Would you be able to stop and can we take a photo in front of that house? And it's like, of course. Just to hear these little stories that kept coming forward were really, really interesting. And I don't know. I was going to go somewhere else.
Do you feel any sense of responsibility doing these things you do?
I think that's probably something that drives me, definitely. Looking at, I've got this amazing art training and I can use it to something that I can work through things myself that maybe help share stories or help other people. I don't know if it does, but I think that kind of drives me internally a little bit to always be moving forward. But also it's really hard to break away from the military. I've tried to push it back, let it go.
Talking about breaking away, the Ukraine thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's the thing. So I've embraced those things and embraced that, instead of running from the military, instead of being angry, to work with it and see what I can do through art to document the military or share stories. And so I applied to the Canadian Forces Artist Program out of the War Museum in Ottawa last year and I got accepted and I proposed to go to Ukraine to be embedded with the Canadian military on Operation Unifier while they train the Ukrainian forces. And so I went in December and I was embedded with the military for 8 days and then I stayed in Ukraine to do more research and travel. And to be with the military as a civilian was a totally different thing. It was very weird.
In what way?
Everyone's in uniform. I'm just not. I'm just the civilian attached that's sitting in the cafeteria and people are like, who is that girl? What are they doing here? So
how was it for you?
I think it actually helped having the military background to be able to sit down with soldiers and say, hey, I used to be in the military. I deployed to Afghanistan. I've done the training. I know your job. I understand what you're doing. I think it helped them open up more.
There was a photo you put up on Instagram and you were talking about you were forming I I can't say the right word, but basically kind of like a map of the scene with rocks.
Yeah. It was like first thing in the morning. It was freezing, and the Ukrainian forces were getting ready for their next battle move in their final week of training. And so they had leaves on the ground. They had walkie-talkies and different random objects that like it's like this is this vehicle and this is the trench line, and they were going over their orders and their plan of attack. And so I just took a quick photo looking through a Canadian soldier's legs and a Ukrainian soldier's legs, and just tried to take a quick shot. I don't think I was supposed to take a photograph of that, but it's not a real operation, so I thought it was fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really interesting to see the Canadians working with the Ukrainians and really understand the very different, the differences, in the two different countries and how we approach things. And I was really interested in looking at the architecture of war and the history of war in Ukraine and how that continues to impact the current political climate and economy and drive the war in the East. So it was interesting to see how it's a lot to get into.
One of the photos that stood out for me was a big satellite mast thing.
What was it?
Like a radio antenna of some kind.
Oh, yeah,
Huge.
that was in Chernobyl. Yeah, so I went to Chernobyl and did a tour. That was separate from the military, but that was a military base. It was a radar detector.
Yeah.
And so it was huge. So it was really interesting to learn a bit more about the history around that.
Is
as
that
well.
place safe to?
Yeah, it's pretty safe. I mean, you're not supposed to sit in the ground or but people live in Chernobyl still. No one lives in Pripyat, which is the main town that was right beside the where the explosion was.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was very eerie. Yeah.
It looks so empty.
I want to go back. I find I like abandoned places. I want to know what the human interest is in that, because people are always so interested in going to abandoned buildings and I don't know, even trenches or bunkers. You can go on YouTube and find so many videos of people crawling through things just because they're interested in what's there. Maybe it's not knowing what's around the next corner, but I think I'm interested in why people are interested in going to abandoned places. I don't know.
Why do you think you're interested?
I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. I don't fucking go to abandoned place. You know what? In my mind, I know it's a movie. I've seen so many movies as a kid that I always expect the worst things to happen, and they don't happen.
No.
So I'm not super adventurous. But there's a place in, I think it's Beaver Bank or something. Anyway, it was a station I was there, and it's not used anymore.
Yeah, it's an old military. It's an antenna or some sort. I've never been either.
I see those photos, and I really want to. That's the one place I know I want to go to. But I know why I want to go there. I want to go there to take photos and I'm writing. So I made this film set in this future that's messed up, and I'd like to shoot something there someday.
It's like a dystopian future.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
I think there's something really interesting, and also aesthetically.
Yeah, well,
attractive
also there's
or pleasing. I don't know. It's full of sadness and dark stuff, but there's a reason why it's empty and not used by people anymore,
Yeah.
But it was really weird walking through and hearing our guide talk about, what people were doing when the explosion happened. And
what were some of the things they were doing?
one thing that I thought about, there's different rays that the gamma and alpha, and I don't really know it all, but they were talking about one that it's not good to digest. And we were in front of the grocery store, and it's now emptied, and there's old shopping carts and kids' toys. And he said a lot of kids were out here eating ice cream, and you've got radiation raining down, and they're eating it. And so those things kind of are jarring when you hear it, because you're in this place, it's completely deserted and falling apart, and then you have this image of kids running around eating ice cream and they're so happy, and there's the carnival that was there at the time, and they had the Ferris wheel, and people are out and they're it was hard to imagine that was tough, but
okay. Okay, so let's go to a lighter note.
Not
Jujitsu.
eating radiation. Yeah, Jujitsu.
It's light.
Yeah.
I remember I didn't even know you did Jujitsu.
It's still new. I've just been doing it just over a year now. Yeah.
And then I see the picture that you were I think in New Brunswick, was it?
I a competition picture.
Yeah.
I was in oh gosh, Pictou?
Yeah, Pictou.
Yeah.
I'm wait, what? The thing thing about jujitsu is it's most other ones is like, oh, I'm gonna kick you and stuff, like taekwondo and stuff. But jujitsu
It's the
is
gentle art.
dangerous. It's dangerous because I watched this YouTube video, right, and like the holds can take you on seconds. So this guy, it's supposed to be one of those funny videos. It was funny, but it wasn't funny. So this is what happened. So this guy is like a teacher or whatever, and he's showing this hold with his thigh. So in his thigh, puts the guy's neck in there, and then I don't know, like, whether I was caught up because it was being shot and he wasn't there, and it's like, and this is what you do. And the guy's tapping him and he's still going on, and the guy sleeps off.
Yeah.
I was like, and the guy,
gosh, that's terrible.
Yes.
The tap is sacred, right? So
yeah. Leave me right now.
Yeah, stop. No, and that's the funny thing. Like, it's considered the gentle sport, the gentle art. That's what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is. It's very physical. The only person that will ever let you fall asleep is yourself, or break an arm is yourself, because your ego got in the way and you didn't want to tap. If you feel a choke coming on, you tap. And if you get arm barred and you feel your arm, getting to that point, you should tap way before that point, especially in training, maybe not so much in competition.
Yeah.
But I find for me, I started referencing, I've got this painting here, and I started referencing jiu-jitsu positions and building them together and creating my own repeat patterns, and then camouflaging them through color. And it allows me kind of stick with my themes of camouflage, but it's a new topic. I don't really know how to talk about it yet or why I'm doing it. But jiu-jitsu itself, I talked about things that I experienced in the military that have been very difficult to work through. Since I started doing jiu-jitsu, I found it's kind of propelled me to work on things quicker. Emotions come out, or something happens on the mats where it makes me feel a certain way that connects to something that happened a long time ago. And it's like, okay, well, why am I feeling this way? Why am I angry? Why am I upset? So it's forcing me to kind of work through things at a faster rate, which I find is really interesting. I think jiu-jitsu is incredibly good for any person who tries it.
What happened to your arm?
Oh, it's just overuse. So I think my tendon's just a little angry with me, so I have to rest. It's hard for me to sit and rest.
How often do you train for?
I train every day doing something. Jiu-jitsu I've been doing 5 or 6 days a week, and then I'll do Pilates or other things here and there. I also was doing kickboxing for a little while before getting into jiu-jitsu. So I am a very active person. So for me, when I get injured, it's hard. I don't know how to sit still. But yeah, it's been interesting to see how jiu-jitsu has come into my life and how it's influencing so many different aspects of my life. And it's exciting because every time you go, you learn something, and it's such a humbling sport, One day you could be feeling great, the next day you just tap every 5 seconds and someone's got you, you get smashed, and it's like, oh.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go home and cry in the shower, and then I'm going to go back tomorrow, and I'm going to get smashed again, but I'm still learning, I'm still growing, and it's like you can actually see the growth, which I think is pretty cool.
So where do you train?
Halifax BJJ Society. I highly recommend coming out and trying it sometime.
Nope.
It's not for everyone, though. It's not for everyone, yeah.
And the outfit is, they don't see it. Do those things even rip?
The gis?
Yeah.
No, they're pretty sturdy.
Holy smokes.
It's all about the grips. That's probably why my wrist is angry from grabbing and pulling. But,
okay,
yeah.
I'm going to end it with this.
Yeah,
so you've done this whole thing, your military and the camouflage. What's your next project?
Right now, I'm working with the Mount Network for Community Engaged Research on War and Conflict. We're putting together a book, so looking at local stories in Atlantic Canada, looking at Indigenous stories, African Nova Scotian stories, veteran stories, military families. All these different topics, art, how we use art in Atlantic Canada to document war, peace, refugee stories, and we're bringing them all together in a local context. So I'm working on that right now.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah, well, I'm working as a section person, so I'm in charge of working with Dr. Raina Green from the Mount, an English professor, and we're working on the section that focuses on representations of art. Amazing group collaboration. There's some pretty phenomenal people. Every single person that's working on that book is incredible. And then I've got a show coming up at Hermes Gallery June 7th, and I'll be showing all my Jujitsu camouflage paintings. And then starting October, I'll be starting the residency here at the Center for Art Tapes.
Oh,
so I'll be working on a lot.
Yeah, that's cool. What will you be working on?
I'm going to be working on all the interview documentation and video work that I did in Ukraine. So working
That's
that
a lot
together.
of work.
Yeah, I'm still working on it right now, but I'm hoping to have all my interviews transcribed so I can come in here and
Who's
start to piece them.
transcribing it?
Me.
Oh, Jesus.
You know it.
Oh, that's a lot of work.
Yeah. What about you? What's next for you?
Me? So I when I talk to people, I'm like, oh, I'm busy now. I only have time in a couple months. I'm like, it's fine. I'm going to do this forever. And I also just got a radio show on CKDU. So,
What? Congratulations.
Yeah, so that's fun because I get to play music I want to hear. Because, there's great music on the radio, but there's songs that I'm like, oh, this would be nice to play. But also will get people like you to come talk about what you're doing.
Amazing.
So I'm looking forward for that. And I think I'm ready to make a film again. Yeah, nice. I was kind of burnt out.
Yeah.
I made a lot of films last year. I'm like, so now I'm ready to make a film.
Flows, right?
Yeah, but now, before the film, I am writing a play for the Fringe Festival.
Ooh.
Yeah. So that one is cool, actually.
Yeah.
I'm kind of taking this film I made and I don't know, I'm making a play out of a sci-fi. So it's a sci-fi play.
Ooh.
I'm scared, but
you got this.
But actually, last night I finally I realized what the ending of my film was. Oh, what the ending of the play was, and that's something I struggle with the ending. But I think I finally have the ending.
It's hard for painting too. I never know when I'm done. Like, to be like, oh, and I'm like, I don't. I usually end up working too far, and then I'm like, oh, I screwed that up.
A friend of mine I had on the podcast actually gave me a trick. So now when I want to write, I kind of don't write until I know what the ending is. Like, oh, this is what happens. Then I write everything to get to that ending. So it's kind of a cheat. But I don't know how you do that with a painting, though.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, I have an idea. It never really ends up being that idea. Just got to let the paint manipulate you. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
By the way, you have the most infectious laugh. I love it. It makes me so happy inside. I love when people just fully laugh. You know?
I don't understand when people are like,
I like the full laugh.
Yeah, because, when you laugh, you're letting it out. You should just go with it.
Let it go. That's our theme for today. Let it go. Just don't start singing the song.
Okay, no, Jessica.
Thank you so much for having me on
much.
today. It's been a pleasure. Yeah, it's been a treat.
I enjoyed myself. I actually have a lot of more questions. I'll ask after the camera goes off.
We'll have a part 2 at some point.
Yeah.
I'll interview you. There we go.
Suck at that. Thank you very much.
You.
This is the Blackout Podcast. Thanks for listening.